I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome, everybody, to RealAg on the Weekend. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. Hope you had yourself a great week. And, rain, depending on where you are, getting dumped on. You know, for some of these areas, this is the rain that we needed, and hoping that we don't have some of the flooding in the Calgary area that has been feared. But, you know, out in the agriculture landscape, there's a lot of people begging for this moisture. I was talking earlier this week to Rob Stone. He's from Davidson, Saskatchewan. And here's what Rob had to say about his current crop conditions and the need for some moisture.
They look better than they should right now. We're not a lot of moisture, all of those sorts of things, but we had some moisture during May to kind of catch up some germination. Hilltops and things are behind. We've got a couple of fields of wheat that I'm not very proud of right now, but overall everything else is pretty okay. If it got hot for a couple of days, I think it would be pretty not okay. It's been cool, cloudy, getting 3 100ths of an inch, 5 100ths of an inch type of increments of little showers and things like that. That, you know, makes things perked up, but we're not moving ahead. Some of the early wheat is starting to flag leaf, and I suspect that there's a few heads starting to push out, so that's a little early. So some premature reproductive activity happening, so that is the sign of stress for sure.
Yeah. So do you got some subsurface moisture there that's allowing it to hold on, or what? Like,
we had lots of snow.
Yeah, okay.
So there was some of that, and then the argument goes on how much you can't grow a crop on snow, but it does give you a bit. We were really dry going into freeze up last fall. Like, there was no moisture since basically last July. So it's just kind of hanging on. I think the cool temperatures as much as anything. We've had just over an inch since the snow left us this spring. So
yeah.
We've got we're keenly tuned to every weather app that says we're getting an inch this weekend.
I've got the same thing in Lethbridge. It's saying, let's hope.
Oh, if we don't get this one, there will definitely be a turnaround in crop condition and I think attitude and optimism towards this year in general. So I hate being that guy, but I think that's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah. That was Rob Stone of Davidson, Saskatchewan. Of course, you can hear that entire conversation with Rob by listening to the RealAg Radio podcast. That was Thursday's episode for the Farmer Rapid Fire. You know, overall, like, you look at the drought maps, it's pretty significant. Northern Plains is supposed to be getting a bunch of moisture here over the weekend as well. And heat domes in Eastern Canada, Mother Nature. It seems like this year's kind of like a little bit of a feast or famine sort of situation. And you know, recency bias, it probably feels like that every time this time of the year. But, this year definitely so. Well, hey, today on RealAg on the Weekend, we're going to hear from Chris Vervaet of COPA. That's the Canadian Oilseed Processors Association. COPA represents all of the big canola crushers and soybean crushers in the country. And Chris has got some information on the recent RVO announcement in the U.S. and how that good news, bad news sandwich for Canadian canola indeed. We're also going to talk markets with Jody Lawrence. He's got some comments on the overall commodity complex, mainly around corn, because corn does lead the market. And I know we don't have a lot of grain corn in the Western Canadian prairies, but it does lead on the direction. He's also got some thoughts on wheat as well. And we're also going to walk through this year's inductees into the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame. Some great contributors there. And I think, you know, when we have these Hall of Fame inductions, we need to celebrate those people. And I really like drawing some attention to their contributions. And, there's obviously teams around all those people, but, there's people there with great vision and foresight, and they've appreciated the grind of making real things happen and providing value, not just to, their own situation or the companies they work for, but the industry as a whole. So we'll go through that list. Hey, if you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. And do me a favor. why not go to realagriculture.com/subscribe and make sure you are getting any of our free e-newsletters that go out and you're getting the information you need. The Mind Your Farm Business, the Agronomist, the Western Canadian email update, machinery, cattle, dairy. There's a lot of stuff in terms of email options through realagriculture.com. So that's realagriculture.com/subscribe. Okay, let's get to my conversation with Chris Vervaet of COPA talking about some of the new biofuel proposed rules in the U.S. The RVO number was actually above. If you do some of the calculations, we're actually higher than what some of the expectations were. I guess from a canola perspective in your membership in Canada, are you satisfied with what you heard last week?
Well, there's always details to unpack, and I look forward to doing a little bit of that with you today. But I think if we zoom out and look at this high level, we are very encouraged to see what was proposed last week by the EPA. Those volumes that were proposed better align with the actual reality of production capacity for biomass-based diesel in the United States. And that's something that industry has been asking for quite some time. So to see the proposed rule actually reflect reality, again, is very encouraging, I think, for fuel producers and for feedstock providers alike.
Now, Canadian canola is considered a domestic feedstock, but it looks like there's a little bit of a catch here. In terms of it's like 50% of the RIN value. Explain that to people.
Yeah, so this is, again, looking at some of the details behind those large RVOs. We do see a new requirement being spelled out or being proposed on what value of a RIN. And a RIN is that credit that is traded within the renewable fuel standard marketplace in the United States. That's what fuel producers want. They want to see that RIN. They want to see a maximum RIN value. What's being proposed in the rule is that the RIN value for any imported fuel or any fuel made from imported feedstock would have a 50% haircut on that RIN value. So from our perspective, Shaun, that is unfortunate. Again, notwithstanding my comment that at a high level, seeing these RVOs be as large as they are is very good news. But this is the unfortunate piece of what is being proposed.
Does that disadvantage Canadian processors or the crush industry in Canada?
Yeah, it does. So if you take a 50% haircut on these credit values, and again, it's those credit values that the fuel producers want. That is what they're all after, to maximize those credit values. So if we can't, as a foreign feedstock, generate the same credit value for fuels produced from Canadian canola versus domestic canola or domestic soybeans, that is a significant competitive disadvantage for us.
You're listening to my conversation with Chris Vervaet of COPA about the recent RVO announcements in the U.S. and how it's going to impact Canadian canola. We'll have more of that discussion when we come back. You're listening to Real Ag on the Weekend.
With volatile markets and rising costs, now's your chance to be part of the solution. It's time to secure your future with Genesis Fertilizers. Gain control and ensure access to locally produced nitrogen. Act now to protect your farm's future for generations. Visit genesisfertilizers.com to learn more.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Mazik Seeds and Lalamon Plant Care.
If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
Biofuel issues are one of the issues I don't think get enough discussion in Canada. We're not talking about it enough because it's demand creation, and it also does create, I know this is a bigger issue in the US than in Canada, but energy independence and really allows for that domestic production. And, obviously we have energy production in Canada, but this is another way to get there as well. And it kind of rounds out the regular energy industry from my perspective, and it does well, and it creates demand for farm commodities at the same time, which is, I think, a big benefit. Let's continue my conversation with Chris Vervaet of COPA, talking about the recent RVO announcents and how it impacts Canadian canola. Because the RVO is I guess a number above what was expected, you think there's going to be enough demand that it's still going to pull some of that Canadian product into the U.S. system?
Yeah, I think that's part of the story. I think there's also room for optimism, just again, looking at a higher level.
Yeah.
When you see the volumes that are being proposed, again, aligning with what production capacity is in the States, that's going to, the way it's currently proposed, draw more domestic feedstock like soybean oil, for example, perhaps into the fuel sector, which creates just more opportunity for other vegetable oils to perhaps fill some gaps. So there's going to be room for canola oil to maybe take a bigger piece of the market share in the food business, for example. And I want to emphasize that, and keep using the same wording, right? This is a proposed rule. This is not cemented yet. There's still opportunity from our perspective to see some changes to how they might look at Canadian canola, for example. And the rule that was proposed last Friday, the rule itself, Shaun, is 290 pages long. And then you look into the details of how they came up with these numbers. That's an additional 400 pages. So we're still reading the details, but there's some, let's call it, encouraging language in the rule itself with regards to direct mention of Canadian canola, the opportunities that it provides for fuel producers in the United States. We have a lot more supply to offer in the years ahead. We're a predictable trading partner. So these are all arguments that we're going to be looking to make before this rule gets finalized, with the hope that we do see canola treated on a level playing field.
Yeah, one of the observations or takeaways that, I've kind of asked a lot of people about is the fact that, because of the acre differences, canola is one of the crops where there is a big acre difference, and it's in Canada's favor compared to the U.S. Now, there's a lot of opportunities for U.S. grown canola going forward, especially from a genetic standpoint, winters or springs. But having the ability to pull Canadian canola or Canadian oil into the U.S. market, it gives the U.S. acre for canola some scale in this game, right? Where you're now not talking about 1-2 million acres. You're talking about something that's over 20.
Absolutely. And the way that we view this, and I think many of our U.S. partners in agriculture view it the same way, there's a real opportunity here on both sides of the border when it comes to biofuel policy development to take what I like to call a Fortress North America approach, Shaun. So these types of policies are being developed on both sides of the border with an intention to help support agriculture, to support energy security, to support jobs, value-added processing, whether that's fuel or feedstock processing. These are all part of why these types of policies and regulations are being created, again, between Canada and the United States. So our hope, and we start to see this from some of the language and the positions from our U.S. partners as well, is to take more of a North America approach, right? Whether it's on feedstock or fuels. But for the purposes of our conversation today, when I talk about that concept of North America or Fortress North America, for example, we believe there's opportunity there for Canadian canola to carve out some type of an exemption or perhaps a change to the proposed rule that, again, allows us to compete on a level playing field.
Yeah, and of course, 45Z is something that you've been working on a lot too, but we still don't have all that ironed out as well, especially relative to those carbon intensity scoring.
Yeah, that's a moving target, both technically, like you flag from a carbon intensity perspective, but also 45Z and changes to that particular provision in the IRA is a live discussion, literally, as we speak within the Senate as part of that tax reconciliation package that's moving through the system. So there's also some changes coming there that we are very mindful of and keeping abreast on.
Now, Chris, I get a whole bunch of emails on both sides of the issue when it comes to some of these biofuel programs. I've always said there's a difference in the attitude towards biofuels in the U.S. versus Canada, and I think we've even done some research work I think that sheds light on some of that. I had a piece of feedback. I think I read it on yesterday's show where somebody said, "Okay, like I get it, but it just feels like market interference. Like just we're getting in the middle of supply and demand." Why are some of these programs and incentives, whether tax credits or other mechanisms, why are they important for the biofuel industry?
Yeah, fundamentally, they're important because when we talk about biofuels, it's about transitioning, right? So you're transitioning from fossil fuels to something that is renewable, better for the environment. And often when you are transitioning from fuel sources, or diversifying is perhaps the better word to use, fuel sources, sometimes you do need a little bit more encouragement and incentives to do that. So that's really why you need to see levels of regulation, policy, and incentives to help drive the market.
Yeah. So from your perspective, there's some things you'd like to see maybe altered. There's also definitely some positives. From your perspective, representing the Canadian crushers, do you see last week's news as a net positive or a net negative?
Good question. Again, we're still combing through all the details, but I'll go back to where we started our conversation at that high level. That proposed volume for 2026, that's 5.6 billion gallons from where it was or where it is today, which is just north of 3 billion gallons. That is a net positive. There's consensus really that this is something that we view as a positive step, those volumes being proposed at the levels that they are. Yeah.
And just everybody's information, the expectation, the ask from the industry was 5.25. That's right. Right. So kind of blew through that, in Wall Street terms, blew away earnings. And, I think there's a lot of positivity. And maybe really to put it into terms that I think everyone can understand, when you see these types of volumes being proposed, it creates demand. It creates demand for soybean oil. It creates demand for canola oil. It creates demand for all feedstock. And, that presents all kinds of interesting opportunities for our value chain. That's my conversation with Chris Vervaet of the Canadian Oilseed Processors Association. Some work to be done there to try to really solidify Canadian canola exports to the U.S. for the use in things like bio-based diesel going forward. I'm going to have some more thoughts on this when we come back. You're listening to RealAg on the Weekend. Back right after this quick break. Want to stay on the leading edge of farm management? RealAgriculture.com features the Mind Your Farm Business podcast, brought to you by RBC Royal Bank. Find it at mindyourfarmbusiness.com or wherever you get your podcasts. RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada. So here's the thing. When it comes to the opportunity for biofuels, I think historically we always really thought of biofuels as like this thing that it was a U.S. thing. But if you look at the domestic crush capacity that we're trying to increase in the Canadian market, you think about just around the city of Regina alone, much of that has to do with the opportunity for something like SAF, sustainable aviation fuel, or renewable diesel. And the U.S. market is critical. It really is. Now, what's interesting is that in many ways, there was a lot of worries if the Conservatives were elected in Canada, they were going to make some big changes. It potentially would be a net negative to the biofuel industry because there was a lot of talk about that CFR, that clean fuel regulation, being the second carbon tax. And the trouble is biofuels are a part of the CFR. Now, Carney's elected. He's the prime minister. It seems like there's a lot less risks now from the political side. Now, in the U.S., that political risk still very much, it exists. And the fact that EPA came out with those numbers, it kind of shocked everybody. I'll be honest with you, because Lee Zeldin, the EPA administrator, has not been a big proponent of biofuels and the RFS going back to his history in Congress. So the fact that they overshot the ask is actually incredible. And listen, there's still some things to be ironed out and detailed out and all those kinds of things. But the U.S., when it comes to canola, the U.S. market very critical for and being able to participate. And hopefully the final rule, it doesn't include that 50% of the RIN value. That's something probably they're going to try to work on for sure. But send me your feedback on any of that. shaney@realagriculture.com, and I'll try to get to as many of those emails as I can. Okay, let's talk markets. So this week I had a chance to talk with Jody Lawrence. He's with Strategic Trading Advisors out of Nashville, Tennessee. And one of the things I asked Jody was, because listen, corn, it kind of rules the roost. It provides the direction for the rest of the market. Okay, so a lot of times we'll hear from the audience, be like, hey, wait, listen, we don't grow grain corn here, so why are we talking about corn? We should be talking about wheat and canola. Here's the reality. The direction of wheat is kind of predetermined. Obviously, wheat has its own fundamentals, but it's critical to understand corn if we're going to understand the direction of the wheat market. So here's what Jody Lawrence, Strategic Trading Advisors out of Nashville, had to say about this overall market commodity complex.
I always tend to tell them, okay, here's the bad news. We'll finish with the good news. And what we think has happened, because if you just look at the July-December corn spread, the industry really expected with, a fairly tight ending stocks number for corn that you would have a nice premium to sell old crop of July over December. And we did up until maybe a month, 6 weeks ago. And now July is an inverse to December. And the hard part about that is what that probably means, and what the cash market's telling us is there's more corn out there from last year's crop, from the 24 crop, that potentially the USDA and WASDE, that they underestimated what was out there, because the cash markets would not be acting like this if the true carry out was down in the 1.4s like they told us it was. And then when you move on to, that's the bad news for corn, is we've kind of kicked the market while it was down, because with the potential of 96 million acres plus, we have exceptional crop ratings. This time of year, we have no weather issues and only spotty and small regional weather issues in the U.S. Corn Belt as far as moisture concerns, that we're heading into pollination in as good a position as the U.S. crop has been in years and maybe decades. And if we have no issues, all the way through Labor Day, the U.S. could produce a 183, 184 national yield on 96 million acres.
That's a lot of corn.
That's a lot of corn, 16 billion bushels. And it's an enormous accomplishment. And it's something everybody should be congratulated for that's in the industry for moving everything forward. But at some point, with the rising cost of land and just the rising cost inside the industry, the higher cover charge just to get in to plant an acre of corn or beans or wheat, canola, oats, anything, that the margins are shrinking by the day.
After we got talking about some of the big supply of this 25 crop on corn, I had to ask Jody, what about wheat?
Well, I think you have a couple things. You had the funds in a record net short position heading into harvest. And the trouble in the Middle East, I think the wheat market is starting to realize that if the U.S. gets involved and it does escalate to a point where any of the other Arab neighbors, the major exporters or the major importers, and, you look at Russia and Ukraine, their problem certainly isn't solved, that the wheat market had absolutely zero risk premium in it and every major fund on the same side of the boat. And today, between all the contracts, they're up 15 to 22 cents. I think today is really just a money movement day, because you've got July 1st notice day next week, so you got people rolling to September or Dece. But you also, there is some concern in that market. You're up at levels right now. Everybody should, profits certainly should be a lot better heading into the winter wheat harvest, which typically over the next 6 weeks, the seasonal's pretty bearish. And the crop ratings for the U.S. are good. So U.S. yields so far have been at expectations, if not a little better. It's one of those things, if you have wheat, a great mentor of mine told me a long time ago, said, if you get a big rally in wheat, unless you have a shocking event like Russia invading Ukraine or just a catastrophic weather event somewhere, that it's grown on every continent except Antarctica, and it gets replenished twice as fast as corn or beans. So that's what you always have to take about where you get your opportunities to hedge your wheat. U.S. soft, over 30 cents in the last two sessions. And I realized the why and that it could go higher. It always can go higher. I would love for this to be the lowest sale of the year, but we're still, even with this big rally, anywhere between 60 and 80 cents below the earlier year highs and the late 24 highs. So, we know, and wheat is in a good position right now. So it's definitely a hedging opportunity, and that's what I'm recommending to my customers.
That's Jody Lawrence of Strategic Trading Advisors, based out of Nashville. Some good insights there on what's going on in the corn market, as well as wheat, as farmers try to figure out their marketing here in this 25 crop on a number of fronts, not just those two crops, but all the things that are being grown across Canada and the United States. Okay, we've got more coming up here on RealAg on the weekend. Let's talk about the inductees into the 2025 class of the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame next. Don't miss out on any of the content that RealAgriculture.com publishes. Whether you're looking for agronomy, current events, or industry news, our daily newsletters bring you the most current information every morning. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is a video series that showcases the latest in canola research and production agronomy. Learn from some of the best at your own pace through quick and timely producer-focused videos available on our YouTube channel. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is the quickest way to keep up to date on all the latest in canola production. Boost your canola IQ with the Canola School, brought to you by BASF, and visit canolaschool.com.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
I've seen a lot of times in this industry where, people commit their lives to this industry, right? Maybe they're farming, or they built a company, or maybe they worked for a company, or maybe they were a researcher. There's just lots of ways to contribute to the industry. And I find a lot of times that, people provide such great value, they have great contributions, and then they retire, or they, maybe move into a different stage of their career out of the industry. And it's sort of like, it happened, but we don't necessarily celebrate. Like, for example, we don't go to a lot of retirement parties anymore, right? Remember, there used to be like the big retirement party, and part of the reason is people just don't retire as much as they used to, and there's less of those golden watches, so to speak. So every year I get excited about the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame. And this year's list of inductees is no different. It's a great list. And in the past years, I'm going to do it again this year, sit down and do these long form interviews with the inductees. And it's always cool to hear their stories and their paths to success. And sometimes that road is very predetermined, and sometimes it's a winding road. Their career took them to places they never expected. And this is true not just in agriculture, but in a ton of different industries. And I just think it's so awesome to be able to reflect with them. And so I love doing those interviews, and I'm looking forward to doing it with this year's class, 6 inductees. And I encourage you to do the same. I'm going to go through the list and some of the things that these people, what they accomplished in their careers. And I want you to reflect on them as well, and really celebrate them like they deserve to be celebrated. And we shouldn't just, whatever. Yeah, it was all good. We should really, really think about some of the contributions. I see this a lot of times with researchers, right? Where somebody committed their life. They committed their life to researching a bug or a pest or a disease. And we don't really actually really think about the contribution, the value that person created for the industry. So take the time. So here's this year's list. The inductees are, first of all, John Anderson. He's an innovative entrepreneur and international business leader who has dedicated his 50-year career to Opie, a global fresh produce food retail business that relies on Canadian agriculture. So from his early days in the warehouse to CEO, John transformed the company with his vision and relentless dedication to excellence to advance sustainable agriculture and support local agricultural communities. We've also got Dori Ginjera Boscheman, dedicated her public service career to the sustainable development of Manitoba's agri-food sectors, a respected leader and mentor. Dory's roles included Deputy Agriculture Minister, where she worked diligently to ensure agricultural policies were responsive to the evolving needs of Canadian farm communities. I remember I interviewed Dory back in the day when she was DM in Manitoba. It was at the Advancing Women's Conference in Calgary. And I said, what's a characteristic that you look for in successful people? And this stuck with me. Shaun, the answer is curiosity. Always be curious. I've never forgot that. Never forgot that. Gaëtan DeRoche has devoted more than 4 decades of leadership and vision to Solio Cooperative Group, Canada's largest agricultural cooperative with roots in Quebec. As CEO, Gaëtan laid the foundation for a more innovative, resilient, and supportive agriculture sector in Quebec and beyond. Joe Hudson was instrumental in shaping Canada's egg industry as the founder and CEO of Burnbrae Farms for nearly 60 years. Joe's leadership saw Burnbrae transform the egg sector with his vision for vertical integration and become Canada's largest family-owned and operated integrated producer and marketer of eggs and egg products. We've also got Dennis Laycraft, a lifelong champion for Canada's beef industry, who has made an incredible mark on many critical aspects of today's industry. For more than 40 years, his patient leadership style at the Canadian Cattle Association has been opening and defending markets and building critical capacity as he continuously drives Canadian trade and competitiveness interests. As a skilled collaborator, Dennis has played key roles in many initiatives, including the Canadian Roundtable for Sustainable Beef, Canada Beef, and the new Agricultural Market Access Secretariat. So congratulations to Dennis. And also Peter Sikkema. Now, we have here in our story on RealAgriculture.com that he's a leading weed scientist. No, he's a legend weed scientist who dedicated his career to developing weed management programs for producers in Ontario and beyond. A researcher and educator at the University of Guelph Ridgetown campus, Peter's research helped farmers minimize crop yield loss from weed interference and maximize net return per acre. He's internationally recognized for pioneering work on herbicide-resistant weeds in corn, soybeans, and small grains, and edible beans. So big congratulations to Peter Sikkema. So the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame honors and celebrates Canadians for outstanding contributions to the agriculture and food industry. Portraits are going to be on display in the Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame Gallery located at the Royal Agricultural Winter Fair. And the Hall of Fame also publicizes the importance of inductee achievements to Canada. The Hall of Fame was organized in 1960 and is administered by 12 volunteer board of directors residing in regions across the country. You can find out more by going to CAHFA.com. And the ceremony for these 6 new inductees is going to be in November in Victoria. So hoping to be there for that as well. And you should be too. Honestly, I think it's a pretty cool deal to be able to celebrate these contributions. And I know majority of these inductees, and I was joking earlier this week talking to somebody about it that Dennis Laycraft from CCA, I don't think anybody I don't think I know anybody that has more probably air miles through our Canada than Dennis. That dude has been on the road for his life across the world. Trying to, like I said, they're opening markets, celebrating the opportunity for Canadian beef, and trying to drive exports. And all of these people, like I said, have in their own ways, in their own areas of the industry, done great things for agriculture. So congratulations to all 6 of this 2025 Canadian Agricultural Hall of Fame class. One thing we didn't get to this week, the G7. I thought it came off very well. Prime Minister Carney did well. He continues to handle the Trump file very well. And whether you agree with the politics of Prime Minister Carney or not, I think we have to admit, in these early days, he is skating the chaos and the sensitivity of the relationship with the U.S. very well. And for a guy that said, hey, elbows up and the relationship with the Americans is dead, he's proving that is not the case, and he's showing a keen interest to handle the situation and put Canada in a better position on their side of it. I hope he's able to close the deal. I really hope he is. Time's going to tell. There's still things yet to be done. Some people very upset about this Golden Dome idea and whether Canada should be participating. He's aggressively getting to that 2% number on the defense spending. So we'll see. We'll see what that deal looks like, as they're trying to get some sort of deal done in the next 30 days. Hey, I encourage you over the weekend to check out RealAgriculture.com. On behalf of myself, Shaun Haney, and everybody at the Real Agriculture team, have a great weekend, everybody.